I'm going to simplify as much as possible what I'd like to say about India as a world-level great power in the first and second millennium, and before the first millennium in the Indus Valley civilization, starting from there. Are you all familiar with the main tenets of Indian history? I'm sure you are. You have read about the Indus Valley civilization, haven't you? Dear friends, let me ask a question to the children. What do you know about the Indus Valley civilization? One of the oldest civilizations, one of the cradles of civilization, one of the first 4 civilizations of the world. Now, was India a great power during the Indus Valley civilization, which reaches its zenith between 2500 and 2000 BC, before the Common Era? I think so. Why? Because it achieves a very high level of culture in the things that matter. For example, trade. No country can become a great power without being a great trading power and having a major share of the world's trade. The Indus Valley civilization had major trading activity to the west of India with the Sumerians. You know about the Sumerian civilization, one of the cradles? That's right. They used to export teak wood and marble, can you believe it? And with Mesopotamia, lapis lazuli. So there was a very thriving maritime connection between India and to the civilizations to the west of India, which is something that we are trying to revive today. It's called the restoration of India. I don't like the word, the rise of India, which is the Western discourse. I always talk about the restoration of India, because India was always a great power in some way or the other, even during its decline, and I'll explain that shortly. Okay, Indus Valley civilization. Look, I'm going to share. Please listen to me at the back. Dear children, please pay attention. I'm going to share with you 3 kinds of GDP data based on the great studies of Angus Maddison, the great Cambridge historian, the greatest historian of a statistical study of history. In the first millennium, do you know, between 0 AD and 1000 AD, the first millennium, India contributes 32% of the world's GDP. 32% of everything we produce in this world of ours, on this earth, was produced by India, which is 1/3. It is astonishing. And how is it that most Indians don't even seem to know about this? For 1000 years, consistently, 32%. Then the gradual decline of India begins. Still, India is a great power. At the death of Aurangzeb in 1707, India still contributes 24% of the world's GDP. Do you know what is GDP? Gross domestic product. All the things, all the stuff that we produce. 24%, 24 out of 100 of the stuff that the world produced was produced in India, even though there is a gradual decline. And then what happens? The 2 centuries of humiliation, as Dr. Jaishankar, our brilliant External Affairs Minister, said in his talk at the Atlantic Council in the year 2022. 2 centuries of humiliation. Now that's official language. Are we going to ask for reparations? I'm going to talk about that. Reparations from the British. Shashi Tharoor has written a book called An Era of Darkness. The British made it. Well, they looted India, but the Dutch and the French and the others tried, but they lost out to the British. Imagine what might have happened if there was a share of the spoils rather than the British doing it all at the end of the day. So, now the question is, why am I talking about GDP? There's another question. A lot of people say today that India is not a great power and India will never be a great power because it has, it has high GDP aggregate because it's a big country, right? It's $4 trillion, $3.8, $3.9 trillion right now, okay? Now, India was always a great power because it's a big country. But India is a very poor country. Our per capita GDP, that means per person's capacity to produce, per human being, is always very, very low. It's only $2,400 today. China is $12,000 today. Even Bangladesh overtook India in 2000 during COVID. 2020 during COVID. Briefly. So, a lot of people say that India cannot be a great power because we don't produce, each of us doesn't produce enough. But, you know what? Kishore Mehbubani just said in an interview to NDTV of India, no, India is a great power. India is a great power. It's the number 3 economy in purchasing power parity and number 5 in aggregate, $1990. Number 3, number 5. There is no contest about this. There is no question. At least let us say it is number 5. My view is somewhere in between. I'm not sure. I don't have a good answer whether India is a great power today. But surely it was a great power during the Indus Valley civilization and after the Common Era during the first millennium and for a major period of the second millennium, right up to the end of the Mughal rule, where, as I said, India contributed 24% of the world's production. Now, let's talk about, very quickly, what happened in the first millennium. Do you know what were the great achievements? Dear children, are you listening down there? Is this interesting? Louder! That's it, I like that. Now, tell me one thing. What do you know about why India was a great power? Why India's power and its influence was so great in the first millennium? Why it had the power to persuade the others? That means soft power, but also hard power. As I said, 32% of the world GDP, which is hard power. What was the other things that India contributed to knowledge? Do you know? What? Tell me. Aryabhatta. Wow! Give her a big round of applause. A great answer. Aryabhatta, Brahmagupta, Varahamihira, Susruta. Do you know that the world's first dental surgery was performed and perfected in India in the first millennium? The first dental surgery. All the aches that we get. Philosophy, mathematics, Brahmagupta and Aryabhatta, between them, did 4 or 5 things. One is they calculated pi, 3.14, much before it was done by the Europeans. Secondly, they suggested that the earth is round, it's not flat, much before the Europeans in the Middle Ages, in the late Middle Ages and during the Renaissance. And that the earth rotates around, revolves around the sun and rotates around its axis. These ideas were developed between them by the great Brahmagupta and Aryabhatta. But let me talk about the concept of nothing. Which civilization discovers and develops the idea of nothing? Nothing. Shunya. Zero! Wow! Give her a big round of applause. Now, between them, the zero is discovered by the Indians as a dot. Then it becomes a circle, and as a circle, it goes around in circles to the rest of the world through the Arabs. And our European friends discover, understand zero and the decimal system. And the place of zero, initially zero is only a concept, but zero becomes a number over time as a point of reference. 1 is something in relation to 0. 10 is something in relation to 0. So 0 is the beginning and end of all mathematical knowledge. Who developed the concept of 0? Exactly. And then the Arabs learned it. And algebra, al-Zafir, al-Sifr in Arabic, Ana titkalim Arabi, I speak Arabic. Al-Sifr, 0, or al-Zafr is an so-called Arabic idea that the West learns from the Arabs, is actually an Indian idea that went to the Abbasid caliphs' courts and then for the West. So this is something worth knowing about. Literature, Kalidas. Do you know about the writings of Kalidas? What do you know about the writings of Kalidas? Meghadutam, Vikramashiyam. Medicine I've spoken about. Linguistics, grammar, Panini's grammar. And literature, arts, the Mauryan arts, the stupas, for example, the rock edicts of Emperor Ashok, for example. And of course, trade. Now there is a mainstream view that the Roman Empire went bankrupt and declined not because of Christianity, but because of the trade with India. That's a view that a lot of people are now debating and trying to research. You find stupendous numbers of Roman coins, gold coins in India. The Satavahana kingdom, what is called the Andhras in the peninsula of India, for example. So India was a very open country in the first millennium and a great maritime power in the first millennium, developing its philosophies, its religion, its concepts of kingship, its literature, its ideas of social organization. All that goes to the east and through the so-called spice route to the west. And that's why William Dalrymple calls it the Indosphere, which was most of Eurasia. And he says India's contribution is on par, if not higher than China's, to world civilization. And our friends in France respect India a lot. France is one country, sir, that understands India much better than other Europeans. Much better. The British do understand us, but they don't like to acknowledge it too much. But the French are more open. So it's called Greater India, the Indosphere, the golden spice route. And today we are trying to talk about the I2U2. You know what is I2U2? India, Israel, United States, United Arab Emirates. The partly maritime and partly overland route for trade between India and the Mediterranean. We traded with the Mediterranean in the first millennium. That's the whole point. And of course, Southeast Asia. The greatest Hindu temple is not in India. Where is it? No. That's modern. The greatest ancient Hindu temple. No. Cambodia, Angkor Wat. The greatest Hindu temple complex is in Angkor Wat. Later, of course, it was appropriated by Buddhism. That's different. Okay, quickly, I'll jump to the second millennium, the Mughals. It's very easy to deride and denigrate the contribution of Islam to Indian civilization. We must not make that mistake. What did the Mughals achieve? Well, they again revived the great idea of India. The British claim that they united India. It's very far from the truth. Not at all. India was united during the rule of the Mauryas, the Satavahanas, the Rashtrakutas, the Shungas, and of course the Guptas, Harsha, the Delhi Sultanate, and the Mughals, and the Marathas. The concept of India was always there. and the political reality of India was there. Afghanistan was a part of India during Mauryan rule. The Mauryan Empire was the greatest Indian empire, not the Mughal Empire, but the Mauryan Empire was the greatest Indian empire ever in geographical reach. Do you know that? Exactly. But do not belittle the achievements of the great Mughal Empire. It was the most powerful empire in the world, right? The Mansabdari system, that means based on merit. The UPSC today, Union Public Service Commission, is very meritocratic. You have to be good to become a civil servant, really good. And that's how the Mansabdari system was. That's what the system of the Mauryas was. What I'm saying is the Mughals are reviving the idea of India and the forms of social and political organization that existed much earlier. Architecture, the Taj Mahal, the greatest, the most famous monument in the world is Indian. And the greatest monument of Islam is Indian. Isn't that something we should be very proud of? Absolutely. Arts, music, there's a fusion between the ancient musical traditions, the classical traditions, and what came from the Middle East and Central Asia. Painting, the miniature paintings, and the list goes on. But of course, India starts declining in the 18th century, and the loot of India begins, and Dalrymple calls the East India Company, the East India Company's rule in India, the biggest example of corporate theft in the world ever. I don't know whether it's corporate theft or it's just imperial theft. Well, formally India becomes a colony of the British in 1858. It's taken over by the Crown. But before that it was the East India Company. You know, Utsa Patnaik has done a study, Utsa Patnaik, the great economist, for Princeton University. She says that the British owe India $45 trillion. $45 trillion. 1 trillion is 1,000 million dollars. Right? 1,000 billion dollars, sorry. And 1 billion is 1,000 million dollars. Right? So $45 trillion. And the era of darkness, as I said. So Dr. Jaishankar said British rule was predatory. It was predatory and 2 centuries of humiliation. The question is, what do we do about it? Then did the British unite India? What's the answer? Did the British unite India? No. Why not? The British divided India. Oh, that's a great answer. Of course, Pakistan and then Bangladesh. You know, I always argue that Bangladesh is the second partition of India. I don't call it the breakup of Pakistan. I call it the second partition of India. But nobody talks about it in those terms. Now, I don't think the British united India. I've given the answer. Your holy places are like the diamond, Badrinath in the north, Dwarikanath in the west, north, west, Puri in the east, and Rameshwaram in the south. India, the diamond, always existed, the idea of India. And politically it existed as a united entity, as I said, under the Mauryas, Mughals, and many others. So that reality was always there. What the British did, however, was they settled the chaos through conquest, and they revived that idea of India the way the Mughals had revived the idea of India under the Mauryas. So to that extent it was positive because it re-energized India in many ways. But they were the successors of the process of unification that had gone on much earlier in Indian history. Okay, now I'll jump very quickly to after independence, and I hope I'm not taking too long, just a couple of minutes, right? And then I'll take some questions. After independence, now from 32% of the world's production, GDP, you are 3%, as Professor Subramaniam Swamy, our guru, said. 3%, 3.2% actually, of the world's GDP is being contributed by India. What happened? And Britain, which had something like 3 or 4% of the world GDP before it conquered India, has about 10 to 15% of the world GDP, a small island. Well, the answer is obvious. So produce and resources are going from one to the other. And that's what's called the loot of India. What Dadabhai Naoroji called the drain theory, the drain of the Indian economy. So, Professor Swami has already spoken about the revival of India. I never talk about the rise of India. Europeans and Americans, I've told all my friends, never talk about the rise of India. Talk about the fall of India and the restoration, not revival. Revival is, it's a different meaning. Restoration of India. India is being restored to what it always was historically. So